So before we start, I just want to spark everyone's curiosity. So everyone just take a deep breath and imagine that we're walking down the street in a couple of years from now, and you see me, and we miraculously recognize each other. And you say, "Oh, you're the guy we had a Zoom share on by the Kollel Levi Yitzchok 3 years ago, 4 years ago." And I want you to say that I want to tell you that what you said changed my life. Now let's do a little exercise. Maybe some people want to give some thoughts of what they would possibly be thinking a couple of years down the line. What they're thinking of me, something that I could say that they really want to hear. Anyone want to say something?
In other words, what you want is for people to say what they want to change.
Where do you envision yourself in 3 years?
If we unlocked our potential?
Yeah.
In other words,
and what detail do you think would be the most valuable if I would talk about now that would help get you there? Yeah.
Oh, you look so good. You look as young as it was 4 or 5 years ago. Good job. You're keeping your health in good shape, in good condition.
Oh, I hope so. Anyone else have anything to say? Okay, so I guess we'll continue.
Avraham wants to say something.
Okay.
Avraham, you're muted. Avraham, you have to unmute.
I hope I'm still in good physical and mental health to keep on pursuing the Torah.
Oh. Perfect. That sounds wonderful. I hope to actually meet you all one day. And hopefully this will change your life, and hopefully we'll try and unlock everyone's potential.
Amen.
A lot of people, a lot of people kind of, they get this to a certain age. I mean, I even get these kind of thoughts that they come into my head, and it's like, whatever, you're already set in your ways. Don't bother changing. Just stick to whatever you got, and don't try to teach me any new tricks. It's like sometimes even teenagers have these kind of thoughts. They come into their head, and it's sometimes that's one of we become our own worst enemy. We kind of self-sabotage ourselves. We say, by kind of having a closed mind, sometimes we limit ourselves. No one else even cares what we do. We could do the most wild things in the world, but we, in our own head, are limiting ourselves. We're saying, "Oh, I could never do that. Oh, I'm too old. Oh, I'm this, or I'm not that type of guy." And a lot of times we don't realize that we're the person that's really holding ourselves back. So the question is, first of all, we have to become conscious of that. And the other thing we have to do is that we have to be aware of our essence, because our essence never changes. Our essence, in other words, what I'm saying is that the way Hashem created us, we have infinite potential. The only thing that stops us is our own thoughts. What happens is we identify with our own thoughts. We say, what does it mean when I say I'm not that type of guy? What really means is that it means that the thoughts that I had leading up until today are different thoughts than what this new job or new thing that I want to do requires of me. So actually, this morning I was in shul and someone read the Hayom Yom, and I think it's actually very relevant. I'm gonna read it. So it goes like this. One time the Alter Rebbe was walking out of his room and he overheard his wife was talking with other women. And she said, mine says, she was referring to her husband. My husband says, whatever the issue was, it doesn't say what the issue, what they were actually discussing, but she was obviously expressing her husband's opinion. And she said, mine says. And the Alter Rebbe heard that and something lit up inside of him. And he said, if with one mitzvah I become yours, in other words, referring to the mitzvah of getting married, he says, now imagine how many mitzvahs, how many mitzvahs we do for Hashem, how much we become part of Hashem's people. Imagine how much we belong to Hashem if we do hundreds of thousands of mitzvahs for Hashem. So I heard this morning and I was thinking, where did he see that in her words? They were obviously talking about some random topic. It wasn't something that all of a sudden would have, I missed a bit. What happened is that after he had that thought, he fell into a state of deep meditation, and he was there for quite a while, and then he came out and he had a new interpretation on a couple of verses. We're not going to get into the verses right now, but the question is, where did he see that in her words? All she said, all he heard from her was, mine says. So it goes like this. If you plant an apple seed, you're going to get apple trees. If you plant an acorn, you get an oak tree. But you won't get an oak tree from planting apple seeds, and you won't get an apple tree from planting acorns. Because, in other words, if you put wheat in a mill, you're going to get wheat flour. If you put barley in a mill, you'll get barley flour. You can't put barley in a mill and expect to get wheat flour, and you can't put wheat flour and for some reason get barley flour. It doesn't work that way. It's all about the input. So here's the thing. If we want to really change our life, if we want to make our life worth living, whatever we have left of it, we have to do some input. And then stage 2 is the insight, is when we look at what we put in and we figure out what to do with it. So what I'm seeing here from this Hayom Yom is that the Alter Rebbe was obviously full of connection to Hashem. Anything that he thought of, he just automatically assumed it's something connected to his service of Hashem. He didn't think that she was talking about him, because he himself personally wasn't on his own mind. Hashem was on his mind. So as soon as he heard mine says, that triggered inside of him, because inside of him was all about Hashem. So obviously the first thing that he did was think of, oh, it must be something about my service to Hashem. So now, by the way, random question. How many people are still keeping their New Year's resolutions?
Maybe you should ask how many made New Year's resolutions.
How many? Well, let's not talk about, let's just say, what's the date today? Is the 14th of February.
14th. Yeah.
14th of February. So it's been about 6 weeks. Those that are counting from Rosh Hashanah, it's been a little longer. But
okay,
how many people are still keeping? Okay, Baruch Hashem, we have a couple people still keeping their New Year's resolutions. Baruch
I think
Hashem,
Ben
I wish
might want to
you.
say something. I think Ben
Oh.
might want to say something.
Yeah.
Ben?
yeah, I wanted to say something. I wanted to say that I did not make a resolution for years because I thought the resolution I made 10 years ago is still good. But I always do what I set out to do, whether it was this year or last year or 2 years ago, and I keep working on it. So I don't make resolutions every year because I'm not changing my mind every year. I keep my mind where it was.
I see.
But
You're focused on the big picture.
When you said that, when he heard mine, he thought immediately, what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said you have your whole life in front of you. You're looking at the big picture. That's why not every year. It's people that only think 1 year at a time. They have to make a new year every year.
No,
No?
I don't make every year. I know where I was. I know where I want to be at, and that's where I'm at.
I see.
And if I don't keep it in the right line, then I would make a change. But as long as I'm on the line, I'm not making a change. But I wanted to say, as far as how the Rebbe heard it, that he meant that it's Hashem that she's talking about. I don't know how you would make that conclusion because I'm sure the woman she was talking to was Jewish too. So if she said mine and meant Hashem, it's the same one that is hers too, the woman she's talking to. So how could you make that conclusion?
They were talking about a different issue.
That she's talking about him. I know what the issue was, but I'm saying if you talk to another Jew, you not say mine and meaning Hashem, because Hashem is hers too.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying is that. But here's the thing. The Alter Rebbe automatically assumed that she was talking about Hashem.
Why? If she was talking to another Jew. If she talked to a goy, it's different. She could say, mine is this, yours is not. But she's talking to another Jew, you don't say mine when it's ours.
I see. No, I think what the Alter Rebbe was talking about is how every Jew develops his own personal connection with Hashem.
Okay.
So that he was saying that with his mitzvahs, he developed his own personal connection with Hashem. So that's why he said that with one mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of marriage, he belonged to his wife. Now imagine
I think it takes more than one mitzvah. It takes more than one mitzvah that you do for your wife.
Obviously, yeah, but
I do more than
that's for to
one
keep you.
mitzvah
That's a
for my
different
wife.
issue. Yeah. It obviously you have to always keep working at it.
Well, I want to enter the discussion because I think, Ben, with all due respect, Ben, you're missing the point. You don't make a mitzvah by marrying your wife. The mitzvah is being married. And by that marriage, there are things that positively come from it, not that you have done it for her benefit. All right?
But there is a bunch of mitzvahs that you have to do.
But we're not talking about that. We're talking about I am talking about the sole action of getting married and what my partnership with my wife means, irrespective of what other mitzvot that I do. It's not to me a cumulative addition of what I do for points. It's the partnership I have with my wife in the mitzvah of being married, which to me is a very unique and significant commitment to both another person and to Hashem.
Robert, if you do one mitzvah to your wife by marrying her,
I didn't say I do the mitzvah to
Hashem, by believing in Hashem.
Okay, this is the thing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. But I think Rabbi Wernick wants to get to his point about how we can unlock our potential. So let's like move forward from the Hayom Yom.
Okay.
All right. So there's 2 points that we have to get through, right? One is understanding our innate essence. And the next point that I wanted to talk about is developing input that you can turn into insight. So here's how it works. Let's go back a couple steps. Right? Every Jew is made up of 3 things. We have 2 souls, we have the godly soul and the animal soul. So these 2 things are basically going on inside the person. What happens is like this. I'm sure many of you have already studied, but I just want to give a brief summary. It goes like this. Inside of you is something which wants to be part of Hashem. Inside of you is something that wants to connect to its source. That's what we call the godly soul. That's a drive, and that drive is really what's keeping us alive. Then there's another drive inside of us, which is also, he wants to keep us self-aware. So there's alive, aware, and then there's the next point, which is the power to think and feel. So what keeps us alive is the godly soul, and then and that doesn't think about itself so much. It thinks more about reconnecting with Hashem. Then there's the animal soul, which wants us to be self-aware. It wants us to think of ourselves. It wants us to eat. It wants us to sleep. And from that can sometimes come other stuff like desires and stuff that are not necessarily perfect, but that's a work in progress. But that's that part of us wants us to be self-aware, and that is, it's like an animal. It's just keeping, eating, drinking, all that stuff. Then we have something else called the 10 spheres. We're not going to get so into the 10 spheres today, but essentially that's the ability, the person's ability to think and feel. So what happens is like this. A person from the time he's born is basically spiritually, emotionally, he's healthy, totally healthy. You see, a kid can sometimes get upset. 2 minutes later, he's playing again. Kids don't need to go through years and years of therapy. It's not I'm not talking about extremist situations. Sometimes there's other problems that can be multi-generational trauma. That's a different issue. I'm talking about now normal situations. In most normal situations, a kid develops and he's perfect. What's missing? What's missing is there's two parts of it. There's information. It's basically all information, because even the other stuff that he would learn, that a kid would learn, is not necessarily is how to think and that kind of stuff. But that's also basically all information. So, the reason why I'm going through this exercise to explain this is because I want to explain a very deep point. A lot of times, many times we make New Year's resolutions and they don't work. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. But here's the thing. We have to understand, if we want them to work eventually, we have to understand why they don't work. The reason why they don't work is because we're not taking the energy that we're getting from the godly soul and the animal soul and putting it into the 10 spheres, which is Seichel and Midas, which is the ability to think and feel. In other words, we have to spend time developing the energy. And that's sometimes the hardest thing to do. A lot of times you'll have you'll listen to a good lecture and you get really excited. And what do you do as soon as the lecture is finished? You go out for coffee. Whatever you do, but everyone has their own thing. But sometimes you have a really powerful lecture and you say, you know what? I'm gonna go out for coffee, and life just moves on, and you forget about the energy that you got. So the most important thing is whenever you hear a good insight, whenever you hear a good lecture, what you want to do is take that and put it into and think about it. The more you think about it, the more you internalize it. And then once you think about it, then you have to figure out, how does that make me feel? And it's you think of it, sometimes it's like a kind of childish exercise. Like every time I hear a lecture, I have to sit and spend a few minutes and think, how does that make me feel? But the truth is, it's very, very important. Why? Because everything we hear has an effect on us. It's inevitable. Everything that you hear has an effect. The question is, are we aware of those effects or not? Now, if we want to keep, there's this other thing that everyone talks about, loss of motivation, right? Motivation, people think that motivation is like some kind of like momentum. You have momentum and that keeps you going. And as long as you have momentum, there'll be motivation. And the only problem with that is that it doesn't necessarily lead you in the right direction. The best way to understand your own momentum, your own motivation, is if you have a deeper understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. It's much more than just setting something in motion and then just keep doing the motion. It works, but it's The problem is like this. Every momentum is going to have its brick wall. So say you develop momentum, you go every day to the gym and you get into it, and every day you go to the gym, but that doesn't necessarily bring you to where you want to get. What brings you where you want to get is the understanding of why you want to get there. So here's the thing. Let's go back a step. So let's say you hear something very, very interesting and you want to implement that. So first thing you want to do is you want to understand whose idea was it. Was it your godly soul's idea, or was it your animal soul's idea? And the next thing you want to do, once you figure that out, you want to figure out if it makes sense to you. And you figure out what exactly you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it. And then you work it over in your mind. And then you want to make sure that you feel contempt with whatever you're doing, because if you do something and you don't feel good about it, again, not that you do something because you feel good. That's backwards. You want to feel good about what you're doing, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense. You can develop the feelings. It's very important, because a lot of times we just do something because we know deep down it's the right thing to do, but there's some kind of disconnect. It's like we don't really want to do it, and then you end up not doing it anymore. But here's the thing. What if there's something that you really want to do, you know you want to do it, but you don't feel like doing it? Like, let's say you really want to have a good day. So you make a decision, I'm going to wake up early, I'm going to go daven shachris with the minyan, I'm going to put on tefillin, and I'm going to start my day well. But we have a problem. What's the problem? That you also like to sleep. Right? So now, what sounded really good yesterday, when I wasn't involved in that, now today it feels like I don't know if I really want to do that. I think I just want to stay in bed. So a person could come to think that he's bipolar, which happens. A lot of people, they say, one day I'm motivated, the next day I'm not. One day I'm motivated, the next day I'm not. And they think I'm bipolar. Well, the truth is, it's actually not so far off the truth. Because what happens is that probably who came up with the idea originally? His godly soul. And now who's taking control now while he's in bed? His animal soul. So that's why he has conflicting feelings. On the one hand, he wants to wake up and go to shul. On the other hand, he doesn't. So how do we get around that? What we really need to do is, that's why it's very important to any decision we make, to think about it and to pull it through all 10 of the spheres. All 10. You need to, first of all, you need to get the input. Then you need to understand what the input is. And then you need to think about the implications of that. And you need to come to some kind of conclusion. And that conclusion is going to go into your feeling system. It's going to, do I like that? Do I not like that? Am I complete with that? Is it something that I want to do, or is it something that someone else wants to do? And you go through all 10. We could give a whole nother lecture on the 10 spheres, but you could also look up online. Also, there's a lot of good information about the 10 spheres. But that's what you really need to do. Is the main word is like this. You need to think about what you're doing, and you also need to prepare for issues. Like, in other words, let's say in the morning, I know I'm going to have problems, because in the morning, my animal soul is going to wake up and is going to say, stay in bed. but that's not what my godly soul wants. My godly soul is ready to go to shul. So there's this conflict, and the way to get out of the conflict is to make sure that we understand what we're doing. And we already premeditated the fact that I'm going to feel the way I want to feel. And now, this is a very key element. The fact that we have the ability, the Alter Rebbe actually explains it in Tanya a couple times. He says that the mind controls the heart. What that means is that the mind is actually in control of the feelings. Because the way we develop feelings comes from the world of thought. What I'm saying is like this. Let's say someone likes ice cream. Yeah? He likes ice cream. The next day, he goes to a lecture with a holistic health coach, and this health coach tells him, ice cream is literally poison. It's going to cause insulin resistance, and insulin resistance causes diabetes, and diabetes causes a whole bunch of other issues, and as well as obesity and all the other problems. So and now all of a sudden he stops liking ice cream. So in other words, he all of a sudden he used to love ice cream, and now he hates ice cream. What changed? Nothing changed in his feelings. What changed was in his thoughts. I'll give you another example. Let's say someone makes you really angry. What happened? You were walking down the street looking for a conversation, and this guy just stares at you, and you're looking and you think, oh, maybe this guy wants to make a conversation, and then he just walks right past you, just totally ignores you. And you say, how inconsiderate. This guy was so, like, all I needed was like, I wanted to say hello to someone, and this guy just walks past. If anyone ever did marriage counseling, they or any type of therapy, they talk about this thing called reframing. But essentially, what it is basically, this is the mechanism. We develop our own feelings by creating our own thoughts. We decide what we want to think, and whatever we don't want to think, we just decide, I don't like that. We just make up our own thoughts as we go along. Let's say you wanted let's say you expected someone to do something and they didn't do it. And you say this person, someone that has a lot of insecure thoughts inside of him, someone that thinks that he is, whatever we predetermined the frame of the situation, that's what's gonna ultimately make us feel the way we feel. If someone thinks that someone is insecure, he's automatically going to assume that the other person doesn't care about me. Or if someone, so in other words, all I'm trying to say is that we create our own feelings by the way we shape our thoughts. Now the trick is, this is the secret, the deep secret that I wanted to share with you today, is that we are in control of our own thoughts and feelings. We can control our own thoughts and feelings. How do we do it? By deciding to think good thoughts. If there's a saying which I like very much. It goes like this. It was a philosopher from not so long ago. his name was Sidney Banks. He said a word. He says, you're one thought away from happiness, but you're also one thought away from sadness. This is very deep, because as soon as we realize that I'm in control of my thoughts, I'm in control of my feelings. Let's go back a step. There's this other thing called perception. I'll give you an example. What is ice? Is ice a solid or a liquid? So it depends from what temperature you're looking at. If you're looking at cold temperatures, I would tell you, very cold, freezing temperatures, I would tell you, ice is a solid. You could take ice into a laboratory and analyze it in 100 different ways, and they'll tell me ice is a solid. Then I could take steam into a laboratory and I could ask you, is steam a liquid or is it air? Now, as long as you keep the right temperatures, steam will always stay steam. As soon as it hits a cold window, all of a sudden the window will get full of moisture and wet. Right? So sometimes we could, here's the thing, we know that both of them are made up of water. That's because in the reality that we live in, we see water. We know that ice is water and steam is also water. The Rebbe actually had a long talk once with Rabbi Zalman Schachter about this issue. But the point is that when people in universities, when they discuss things in laboratories, when they analyze things, they're really analyzing what they see. They don't know anything beyond what they see. So it's very often you can get to false conclusions. When they analyze the human brain and the way the brain works, they're not analyzing the essence, because there's a lot of things that they're not able to see. They're not able to see the soul. They're not able to see the godly soul. And that's why they're not even able to see the animal soul. They just see the results of it. So they analyze the person by the results that he produces. So very often, we think, maybe I'll go see some therapy, maybe this, maybe that. And it's all very good. It works as long as it works. I heard a good quote someone said once, a lot of self-help books, they work very well for the author. But they don't work, because if you change one ingredient in that recipe of the self-help book, the system doesn't work. What really works, and this is the Alter Rebbe writes in the introduction to Tanya, he writes that the difference between Tanya and other Musar Sfarim, Musar is like it's basically a spiritual kind of self-help. There's a lot of books they talk about, some books talk about how the person should think about how he's going to go to Gehenna, he's going to go and suffer after his death. Some books talk about, but Tanya is really an evolution. Tanya comes and says that you don't have to worry about all that. You know what you have to worry about? Controlling your thoughts. The most important thing is not worrying and control. All you have to do is realize that we are in control of our thoughts. As soon as you realize that I am in control of my own thoughts, I am in control of my own feelings, I am in control of my reality. Because, again, what is reality? I look through my eyes and I see the world. I see the world through my eyes. I don't see the world the way even myself. Let's say I take an elevator and I go up 100 floors. I'm going to look at the world and I'm going to see a massive world with tiny people, tiny houses. The higher I go, I see the world is bigger and bigger and bigger, and people are smaller and smaller and smaller. If you think of consciousness as an elevator, you would say, right now, I'm worried about all these big problems. You know, the world is so big. And then you start going up a couple levels and you realize, you know, it's not so important after all. If I could just sit and study, I would have everything I need. Or sometimes you get sometimes people get into like rash moods and they decide that they need to do some massive crazy action, otherwise the whole world is going to collapse. If anyone ever gets in those moods, you can take a step back, because chances are that when someone, if you ever decide that you need to do extreme action, otherwise you're going to lose everything, that's most likely the short-term small consciousness. It's yourself thinking short-term and not thinking about the results. And that kind of thinking comes from the animal soul, and it's not real. It is real, but it's real in a way that's not real. In other words, let's call it a real mirage. Like, let's say I'm in bed and I know that I need to wake up, but I don't want to wake up. But the question is, do I really want to wake up, or do I not really want to wake up? In other words, here's the thing. Let's go back a step. What we think about ourselves is not who we are. Who you are is a different subject. Who you are is not decided about what I think or what I don't think. If I think I'm a bad person, that doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. If I think that I'm a good person, that also doesn't mean that I'm a good person. It doesn't mean anything. I'm going to go just do a brief summary one more time. Who I am is made up of a three-pointed paradox. It's the ability to be alive, and that's like the candle, like in chapter 19, the Tanya talks about how the soul is a candle, where it wants to reconnect with its source. It wants to stay alive, but it wants to be more alive than the way it is now. It wants to go back to its source. Then the person wants to be self-aware, and then the person has the ability to think and feel. Now, here's the good news, the very good news that I wanted to share with everyone, is that we can and should and will and are able to take control of our life. We are able to take our life and totally make it a new life. We're able to, very often we think that memory, we identify with memory. Very often we say, you know, well, yesterday I wasn't able to pick up 100 pounds, so I'm not that type of guy. I'm a 100-pound guy. I'm not a 200-pound guy. I'm a guy who goes to the gym, I relax, I pick up 100 pounds. But if I tried, maybe I could pick up more. But the problem is that we keep telling ourselves, "Oh, it's not for me. You know, I'm not that that type of person. I don't like picking up more than 100 pounds." So as soon as we realize that we are the ones creating and destroying our own motivation, our own thought process, and our own feelings, it's all in my control right now. It's all up to me. Whatever I want to decide is what I can do. It's totally all up to me. If I want to be eternal, all I have to do is connect with eternal. If I want to be short term, if I want to just think about myself, then I have to just think about myself. If I want to think about the big picture, then what do we have to do? We have to think big. We have to think about something which is higher than us. We have to think about Hashem. Now, here's another good point. What got me here won't get me there. That's a very deep concept, which I heard a couple weeks ago, and it stuck with me. Because, you know, very often, success can be our worst enemy. Because if you don't do anything, you don't know what your potential is. If you are successful, then that's a real problem, because let's say I was successful to pick up 100 pounds. Now, all of a sudden, I think I start to connect with that success. And I start to say, oh, I'm a 100-pound guy. And the way out of that is to recognize that my success for yesterday is today's failure. And it's for sure tomorrow's failure. And as long as we recognize, but here's the thing, don't get too carried away. Remember that if you ever get rash, urgent, massive decisions, that's usually from the animal soul. So if we want to, but we have to think about both things at the same time. We have to think about the big picture and think about the day-to-day picture. We have to remember, so anytime you decide to do something, if you want to continue doing it, or you want to do something that you never even tried before, or let's say someone always had a dream, I always wanted to learn how to play piano, let's say, for example, and you never tried, or you told you so, or you tried and failed. Does that mean that today, if I would try, I would fail again? The answer is obviously not necessarily. And by the way, just because last time you failed, that also doesn't necessarily mean that we failed. I'll tell you a story. There was one time NASA did an experiment. They were testing out a certain type of fuel for the aircrafts. And they wanted to find something that wouldn't explode. So they took a plane and they took the plane and they remote control, they crashed it. And they wanted to see if it would explode. Now, turns out this type of fuel actually did explode. So everyone was saying, failed experiment. Now, here's the thing. You want to know, it wasn't a failure, and not only it wasn't a failure, it actually saved hundreds and thousands of lives. Because they had inside this airplane, they had a whole bunch of dummies that were going to test the shock, absorb the shock, and test how much how much shuck was inside. And actually, they figured out that that was actually something which was a real problem. They found out that the way the seats used to be designed, if anyone would crash, most people would break their spine just from the impact. So the way they make, until today, they're still making, I mean, it's maybe it's got a little bit better, but even today, when you go on an airplane, you get to benefit from their failed experiment. I'll tell you another story. I had an uncle, a great uncle, who since passed away a couple of years ago. But when he was 70, he decided he always wanted to play piano, and he wants to play piano. So he went on the internet and he found a bunch of videos, and he taught himself how to play piano. After about 2-3 years, he was literally one of the greatest piano players in his entire region. And that all started because he decided to not let his own previous failures get in the way. I'm going to make one more point, and that is conflict. What do we do when you get into conflict? Let's say someone had a fight with someone and the other person really did harm. What do we do? So I'm going to introduce you to a Latin word, which you probably heard. You just don't know that it's Latin. It's called resentment. Now, zent actually comes from the word scent, which developed into the word sense. In English, we have a word called sense, which means to feel, right? So think of the word resentment means to re-feel. And now the question is, who's doing the feeling? Obviously, the person that's carrying the resentment. In other words, if we allow ourselves to continue feeling old failures, if we allow ourselves to continue feeling old conflict, that's what we call trauma. That's where the brain doesn't allow itself to let go of those thoughts. The brain is constantly stuck with those thoughts. And here's the thing. After listening to what we discussed, you could begin to think about how we're really re-feeling because we're still thinking. In other words, when we continue thinking these thoughts, we continue feeling these thoughts. And that's why people can be in conflict for 20, 30 years after one silly argument, because they're still continuing to think about it. So what's the solution? The solution is to go back to basics. We'll just quickly recap. The solution is to remember who you are. Who are you? We are made up of a soul, a godly soul, an animal soul, and the ability to think and feel. The ability, when I say ability, by the way, I mean that it's totally in our control. It's totally in our control. So once we remember who we are, then we can begin to separate from our thoughts. We suddenly stop thinking about how my thoughts define me. I'm this type of guy. I'm that type of guy. We don't know. Once you remember who we are, we stop connecting ourselves. We stop defining ourselves. The word definition in Hebrew is the word geder. Geder means like a gate, a fence, something that's stopping you from getting out. So with that, I'm going to wish everyone lots of success, and hopefully anyone that wants to keep any of their New Year's resolutions, or anyone that still has goals that they didn't achieve yet in their life, there's still plenty of time. All you have to do is realize where the motivation is coming from. If it's coming from my godly soul, my animal soul, or if I just made it up in my own thoughts, And then, as soon as you realize where it is, then sit and take a daydream. Sit for 5 or 10 minutes and dream about where you want to be in the next couple of years, where you want to be, and where that new resolution is going to take you. And then remember that we're not in control of anything. Ultimately, Hashem is in control. It's just our job to try. So I'm going to wish everyone lots of success.
Thank you.
That they keep all their New Year's resolutions, and you can make new ones. Don't be afraid to make new resolutions. Even if you've made a whole bunch of resolutions last year and you failed, don't be afraid to try again. Because as long as you use this secret formula, which I got from the Tanya, you'll be able to control your motivation and feel good. So I wish everyone lots of success with that.
Thank you, Rabbi Wernick. Very interesting, and I'm really glad that you shared this presentation with us that you've been putting together, I know, for some time. And very interesting. I believe you're on the road to becoming a life coach. Or at least it sounds like it. But you definitely have an interesting, outlook of what you've taken from some of the different statements, I guess, in the Tanya and other sources. So I think it's very, very nice and inspirational. And may we all have the strength and the ability to overcome all the obstacles and challenges and succeed, as you say, unlock our potential. And may we all meet you in a few years, and thank you for this. So, Yeshua. Okay. Take care, everyone. Sei gesund.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Warnick.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Sure.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi Warnick.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay.